very expensive affair. There was customized bespoke interfaces. There were some kind of de facto standards being used, but in each case it became very, very difficult to deploy, and very difficult for the customer to get to a stage where they actually had value. Now, the machine vendors initially, many years ago, kind of held on to their own data because they saw it as a business advantage. They would have software associated with the machines that would utilize that data, and so sharing the data was actually kind of a commercial threat. They didn't want to have that data fall into other people's hands. That culture has changed, and we saw that in the first meeting of the CFX committee way back 2 years ago. And we saw that the committee realized that the data is so important for use by the customers. In fact, it's also important for use by each other, because we're going into the age now where technology associated with data is creating a lot of significant value that simply wasn't there before. We see machine vendors exchanging data for closed loop feedback on SMT lines, for example. And we see data being acquired from the factory level to the machines, for example, to give a heads up on what kind of materials will be arriving to the machine, because they may not necessarily be from the same vendor for each replenishment. So this whole culture of being able to create value from data through cooperation, through interoperability, was seen as being far more important and far more beneficial from a business standpoint when that data is shared and when there is interoperability of data. So CFX is an amazing example where machine vendors are now starting to exchange the data and being able to get the benefit from reduced costs, as well as having greater opportunity to access additional information from other machines and from the factory. But that's not the only aspect of CFX that is interesting. CFX also has a very unique feature. With most standards, well, actually with all standards for communication these days in manufacturing, there are two key elements. And CFX has the same elements, similar technologies. In the case of CFX, we have a protocol, the messaging format through which we send data. In the case of CFX, we chose a standard which was created by the banking industry. It allows us to broadcast data as well as exchange data from point to point, so AMQP. And also then the second element, the encoding of the data, the way in which the data is encoded within that protocol, uses this thing called JSON, which is a very popular web language. So it's actually human readable as well as computer readable. And so those are the basic elements you need to transfer data from one point to another. And I kind of see it as being analogous to a mobile phone. So the handset that you buy for a mobile phone, it doesn't matter which company's handset you buy. You have a choice, and you know that they all work with each other. It doesn't matter who you're calling. It doesn't matter what handset they have. There is a standard that governs the communication. And the signal that we connect to, the 3G, 4G, or even 5G, it's a standard. And therefore, we know that there's always going to be the ability for the voices to connect through the signal from one handset to another. So those two elements create a standard that transfers data from A to B. Now, the problem is, what happens if I were to pick up my phone and call somebody in another country where they don't speak English? Now, that may be a problem if the person I call is not bilingual. The language that we speak is really essential. And there are 3,000 languages spoken on this planet right now. So for humans, it's almost like a lost cause. But for machines, why not have just one defined language? Why not specify what each word or each phrase or each sentence or each piece of data means and make it very, very specific? This is what CFX has achieved, and this is a unique feature.